Somebody asked me what it was like over there, and it'd probably take me 30 minutes to tell you the difference between here and there, but just suffice it to say, and I went to two different places, Tanzania and then to South Africa. And the difference between those two places was night and day. But the first place I went was Tanzania. And there's a joke there in Africa that if you're sitting in a group of people, and there's 7 people there, and 6 of them can speak 2 languages, and 1 can speak only 1 language, what do you call the one that can speak 1 language? He's an American. Because everybody over there is bilingual, and the place where I was, Tanzania, is bilingual between Swahili and English. And when I preached, I had to preach through an interpreter. Now, I don't know why this computer does this, but the speech is not going to sync with what you're seeing on the screen. I don't know why it does that, but it does. But I want you to hear a little bit of a Swahili here. John, on the other hand, tells us what Jesus said. The 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th chapters all have to do with what Jesus said. So you can see that a sermon is twice as long, but not because the preacher preaches twice as long, but because everything has to be said twice. And then this other little bit is a worship service at the Negiro Church. Now I want you to take note. The elders here, anytime, maybe I ought to get a copy of this picture and hang it up on the wall. Anytime the brethren here complain about it being too cold or being uncomfortable, this is where they worship. This is where they worship. Now I want you to see if you can catch this song here. Can y'all hear that?
Yes.
You recognize that? Are you washed in the blood? Now, the fellow here in the front, his name is Daniel Gaines. Now let me share with you. Here we go. Get the right button. Let me share with you the presentation I made, abbreviated, at Lehman Avenue when I got back. Africa is a very, very big place. You can actually take the United States, the contiguous United States, and set it on the continent of Africa 5 times and have room left over. People don't realize how big it is. And it's a long way away. I traveled from Nashville, Tennessee to Washington, D.C., got on an airplane, flew to Istanbul, Turkey, 10-hour flight from Istanbul, Turkey, down to Kilimanjaro Airport in Tanzania, and drove an hour from there to Arusha in Tanzania to work with the Andrew Connolly School of Preaching for a week. Then I flew from Nairobi, from Kilimanjaro to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, from there to Johannesburg, South Africa, from there to Cape Town, South Africa, where I spent another 7 or 8, about 9 days. Then I got on an airplane and flew 19 hours back to Washington, D.C. with a stop in Dakar for 1 hour. We couldn't get off the plane. They refueled the plane, cleaned it up a little bit. We flew on into Washington, D.C. and then back to Nashville. Took me 24 hours of travel to get to Kilimanjaro Airport, another hour to get to Arusha. And then took me a little over 31 hours of travel to get from Cape Town back home again. All in all, I covered 21,112 miles, which is almost It's 2,000 miles shy of going all the way around the world, and I felt like it when I got back. But what did I go over there for? Why did I go? And by the way, this ought to be a neat thing for y'all, because this is a missionary presentation that nobody's going to ask you for any money. So that'll be good. I went over there and worked with the Tanzania 2000 project, which was the dream of a fellow by the name of Cy Stafford. Here's Cy and his wife. Cy Stafford is from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And many years ago, he went over to Africa to do some mission work with a fellow by the name of Andrew Connolly. Andrew Connolly was a well-known preacher from Texas, and he established a hospital over in Somalia, hospital and preacher school in Somalia, and he planted the seed in Cy Stafford's mind of setting up a preaching school in Tanzania. Well, that's come to fruition. In 1999, well, actually, in late 99, 2000, Cy and Stephanie Stafford went over there, and he made a 20-year commitment to evangelize the area around Arusha. And the way he went about it is really, really the way it needs to be done. Because a lot of times we'll send a missionary over to a place, and he may go over there and live there 30 years, and if he converts 10 people a year, we're going to be real thrilled. We're going to be, that's great. Oh man, that's a great mission work. But how much better would it be to go send a man over there and let him train preachers, native preachers? And that's what Cy decided to do. They built this school, and in the 19 years he's been there, or 18 years he's been there, they've trained 140 preachers from Tanzania, Nairobi, Kenya, all over sub-Saharan Africa. They've gone out into the field and they've established over 100 congregations and have baptized over 1,500 people. And so he has multiplied his effectiveness. Plus, when he leaves, those guys will still be there, training other people. We'll talk about that as we go through. Now, this is where Cy and Stephanie live. This Tanzania 2000 mission was well planned out. They built this house for the resident missionary from the state. Where I stayed, and I don't know if this point will show up on that screen or not, it won't. The far upper level, the first window that you see there was the room where I stayed. Very comfortable accommodations, and this building was designed, and this house was designed to accommodate about 5 visiting preachers at any one time. Very comfortable. The school they planned, and again, Cy thought this thing through tremendously. They built the school building there. All of this sits on about 34 acres. The school building is very commodious, and it really serves well. These buildings form a quadrangle around the central plaza, the courtyard, where they have everybody in the school can meet there. It's also where the students take their meals. The students come in from all over sub-Saharan Africa. They'll bring in 8 to 12 students a year, and not everybody that applies gets to go. It's kind of like college. They have to show that they're capable of doing the work that's required of them, and it is a college level work that's required of them. But they'll come and they'll spend 3 months. They have to leave their family at home, and they come and they stay 3 months. Then they're allowed to go home for 3 months. And of course, their seasons are exactly the opposite of ours because they're below the equator. So it's actually summertime now. But they go back for 3 months, get the crops in the field and so forth and so on. Then they'll come back to school for 3 months. And then they go back and they do that for 2 years. And while they're in school from daybreak to dark every day for 3 months. So it takes a real commitment from on the part of the student. But this is where they have their meals. And one side of that quadrangle is the kitchen and the pantry. And they also raise a lot of their own food. And one of the things they're doing is they're training these men, not necessarily young men, but they're training these men not only to preach the gospel, they're training them in how to grow a garden. And somebody says, well, you ought to know that. Well, I don't know how to do that, to be honest with you. I wouldn't know how to go out and start a garden. Never done it in my life, so I'd have to read a book about it, I guess. But they're teaching them how to grow crops. They're also teaching them how to raise chickens and rabbits for meat. And so when they go back, when they graduate from the school, not only will they be trained in the Bible, they'll be trained in at least some means by which they can feed themselves. And the reason for this is they don't want these missionaries to be dependent upon United States churches to send them money. They want to be able to support themselves and their family. Now these workers here, these are workers that are hired by the school, and they probably make, $4, maybe $5 a day to come in and stay there all day and cook 3 meals for the students, $4 or $5 a day. There's the lunch, beans and rice. That's what they had every day. So these young people complain about what they get at school and school lunch. Every day, beans and rice. It's a picture of the dormitory. The upper left-hand corner is the dormitory wing of the school. To the right is looking down where they have guest rooms there as well. They can accommodate 8 to 10 guest preachers and teachers. Lower left-hand picture here, this is one of my students, Stephen. That's his room. You notice the mosquito netting, which is a necessity there. Lower right-hand picture is the top of the dormitory wing. You'll notice the tank there. They collect rainwater, and that's the water that they use to wash their clothes and to bathe. Now, the water in the kitchen comes from a well, but all the water that they would use to wash or to bathe with is rainwater collected in these cisterns. And you do not drink the water, period. You drink bottled water. I even brush my teeth with bottled water. You don't drink the water there. You get the epizooties if you do. One area of the wing, one wing of the quadrangle contains the classrooms. There's my class, part of my class there. You see all the books. There's also a secretary, Judy, in the office, well equipped in every way. Part of the library filled with a number of books where the students could do research for papers and sermons and that kind of thing. Well equipped. Cy has done a great job building up the library. This past year, a fellow by the name of Jimmy G., who was the director of the school, came back to the United States and left the school. And the decision was made that it was time to start turning the school over to the local brethren. And so these two fellows sitting at the desk are directors in training of the school. Cy said he was going to work himself out of a job after 20 years, and he's getting close to it. So when he gives up his administrative role in the school, he does expect somebody to come in and live there in that house, to just kind of be the eyes and the ears, to kind of make sure things are on the up and up. But it's going to be turned over to the local brethren. It'll be their school, and they'll run it, and they'll do the training. Already there are people who have been trained in that school who have come back to train other preachers. Again, there's one of the ladies who's making up the lunches for the guys every day, beans and rice. Now, one of the things what I went over there to do was to see our missionary, Daniel Gaines, and his family. This to help you appreciate what it's like over there. See all these things on this table that, we walk down to the grocery store and buy them. There's rice and roni and Nature Valley bars and pasta and Zatarads and Pop-Tarts, vanilla wafers, peanut butter. You can't get it. It is not available. And so what they asked, I wrote to them and said, and no goldfish. They know goldfish. I wrote to them and said, what can I bring you? And they sent me back a list of things, and so I collected those, and I took 2 big old suitcases. One of them was full of all of these goodies. Now, the little boy on the left, that's Josiah. In the middle there is Abby, and the one on the right is Levi. Levi was born in Bowling Green while they were working with us. Great kids, and you notice the Alabama there, so... But they wanted to let us know that they appreciated the things that I brought. What's it like over there? Poverty abounds. This upper level picture here, that looks like something you might store your lawnmower in, but probably throw stuff in there you really didn't care a whole lot about. That's a house. That's where somebody lives. And there's probably 8 to 12 people live in that house. And those look like bunker house to the right there where that sheet metal is. That's another house behind it. And here, we go down to the mall, buy our clothes and stuff, and go to Kroger to get our food. No, not Marusha. That's the market there on the lower right hand. These pictures were taken as we were leaving on a Monday. Now, if this had been a Saturday, that place would be teeming with people. There would be hundreds and hundreds of people in that market. And a lot of what would be there for sale is not purchased with money, it's bartered. One person may bring 3 dozen eggs and swap it for whatever it was he needs. And so it's a different culture completely.
What did they have to eat? What was their like?
They eat a lot of fresh veggies and fresh fruit. Had some of the best pineapple I've ever eaten in my life. Watermelon. They eat watermelon every day. Papaya, squash, beans. They eat lots of veggies. And not much. And the meat they have cows and they have sheep. They don't eat much mutton, but they eat a lot of beef. But it's what I would call a Brahma beef. It's very skinny, very lean, and tough. I didn't care much for it, to be honest with you. But that they have it. But they eat a lot of veggies and a lot of fruit. But you can tell if you see a Swahili fellow like this guy here in the lower right-hand corner, they're all thin. I didn't see one fat person over there. Not in Arusha anyway. They don't have the money to eat a whole lot. But I was comfortable eating what was there. Bananas, oranges, apples. I was comfortable eating what was there, especially with Science and Stephanie, because they have a cook named Agnes, and being from Mississippi, they taught this African cook to cook Southern, so it was pretty good. If you have a question, stop me. Anytime you have a question, I'll be glad to try to answer. This is where we went to church on Wednesday night, the first Wednesday I was there. The Caniso de Cristo, that's Church of Christ. Singing with the kids is just like it is anywhere. It's kind of funny. I taught them this song that I know about Noah. Here is Noah, here is the boat, down came the river. They didn't understand a word of it because they all spoke Swahili, but they liked the song. Lower left-hand corner in Swahili, Swahili kids are just like American kids. When the candy lady brings out the candy, they know where to go. Now that was Sunday morning at the Nariso Church where I preached. One of the things that we saw there when we got away from Arusha proper is the Maasai. Now the Maasai people are what you would think of when you think of Africans in a movie. When you see the old Tarzan movies. The Maasai people, and there are a couple of people in that picture, you can't see them very well, but they live in these huts. These huts are made out of mud and dung, cow dung. And they put these sticks in the ground vertically, make a circle, tie it all together with rope, and then they pat the dung and the mud on it till it makes a wall. And you see the stick standing up beyond that hut there on the left. That's where it's a corral where they keep their sheep and their cows, these scrawny little old cows they raise. Now the reason there are 3 there, the bigger hut belongs to the man, the 2 smaller huts belong to his wives. And a Maasai man's wealth is determined by how many wives he has and how many cows he has. I never was able to determine which one more valuable. But the man, and somebody observed, the man does nothing. The women and the children do all the work. And you can look on the ground here, there's no grass, very little grass and feed for the animals. And so they're moving their animals almost constantly. And the whole week I was there in Arusha, 9 days I was there in Arusha, I never saw an adult herding those cows or sheep. It was always the kids. And some of them as young as these here, moving 25, 30 head of cattle up and down the road. And we think, well, we wouldn't let those kids out around those cows. No, ways. And they're out there, no adult supervision, nothing. Which was one of the amazing things. Somebody asked me while we were eating, and I suggested to them that the people over there have absolutely no concept of the responsibility for raising children. To bring them into the world and let them fend for themselves, which was kind of a strange thing. While I was there, and this was what the pictures that were rolling, and I'm not going to say a whole lot more about this, but while I was there, I had the opportunity to go on a 2-day safari. One day we spent at Tangeri National Park, which is well known for its giraffes and elephants, and you saw lots of those in that picture. And we spent the night at a place called, and I've forgotten the name, but this is where we stayed, something farmhouse. And when the missionary told me we were staying at a farmhouse, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be good. But it was really a very luxurious place, back off the beaten path, but very nice place to stay. And we went then to the Ngorongoro crater. The Ngorongoro crater is a extinct volcano. Let me do this as quick as I can. A volcano, when it erupts, spews out all its lava, and then collapses back on itself, and it forms what's called a caldera. Very few, most volcanoes, including the ones in the United States, don't have very well-defined calderas because half the mountain blows off when the thing erupts. But this one particular is kind of unique in the world in that the caldera was formed perfectly, and the whole ridge all the way around it, the crater edge all the way around it, is intact. And it's about 2,000 feet from the top of the ridge down to the floor of the crater. So all the animals that are in there don't come out. They stay in there. Now they occasionally want to wander out, but it's about 30 miles across, and in that crater are all kinds of animals. Now this is where I saw the lions and the zebras and the wildebeests and all of that. And we spent a whole day in there, and it was quite fascinating. This is one of the ways that Tanzanian people make money, is bringing people in and taking them on these safaris. You've all heard of the Serengeti. Well, the Serengeti is in Tanzania as well as these other places. Our guide told us the difference between where we went at the Ngorongoro crater and the Serengeti is that the Serengeti, there's for every 10 trucks there's one line. In the Ngorongoro crater there's 10 lines for every one truck. I didn't charge my battery on my camera, and so my battery ran down about halfway through the day, the second day, so I missed a lot of great pictures. But anyway, back to Arusha. We came back to Arusha and started. This picture on the top gives you a typical traffic scene. Now that's a 2-lane road. Supposed to be anyway, with traffic going one direction, coming the other direction. This vehicle here to the left is called a dolly dolly. That you can't tell by looking in there, but there were probably, that's a what we call 7-passenger van. There were probably 12, 14 people in there. And they always say that as long as there's room for somebody to hang on the edge or sit in somebody's lap, it's not full. That lower right-hand picture, you see that guy on that motorcycle? That's called a picky. And you rent the back seat on that motorcycle. That's how people get around. They crowd into a dolly dolly, it costs $0.25, or you climb on the back of the picky for 40 cents. The advantage of the picky will take you closer to where you want to go. But we saw these things, these pickies loaded with everything. I saw one that had 3 passengers on it. Saw another one that had a bed on the back. Saw another one that had a truck tire, big semi-truck tires. See? That's just the way things go. And I had a video, and you can't. I couldn't get the video to work. But we drove on down the road here just a little ways, and I was videoing it. And we passed the market, and it just, the impressive thing is the number of people that you see and the filth that's there, because there's no sanitary service. You really can't see in either one of these pictures, but there's a ditch running down on both sides of the road where the rainwater and the sewage and everything else flows. And it's no wonder that people don't live much past 45, 50 years of age there. It's just, and the children are out playing in it. And that's sad to see those kids just fending for themselves and in the dirt. They don't pick up the garbage. You know, here people come around and pick up the garbage, and before that, we take the garbage out and burn it. Just wherever the garbage falls, that's where it lays. You know, car crits running, that's just where it sits till it rusts away.
How often does it rain?
Good question. They have what they call the short rains and then the long rains. The short rains is when it rains for maybe 45, 50 minutes of quits. Those start in early December and last about 3-4 weeks. Then the long rains. And the long rains is when it starts. Of course, December is the beginning of their summer. The long rains is when it sets in and starts raining for 8, 10, 12, 15 days at a time, never quits. Now, all that rain, it'll soak into the ground some, and then it runs off, and when it quits raining, the water's gone. The only way that they can irrigate anything is through wells. They have to dig wells or with a cistern. The ground over there looks like it would grow anything, and it probably would, but there's no water to irrigate it. So that's one of the reasons it's so poor. And all of the fruits and veggies we ate were picked off of farms where they irrigate. One of the things they had there was a coffee plantation. And I've quit drinking coffee, but I brought some of the coffee back to my daughter-in-law. She said it was wonderful. Freshest she's probably ever had. But it's grown on a plantation, and they have wells that they water it with. One of the things that they're doing with this school of preaching, they try to get all the brethren in Arusha together to talk about how to go about evangelizing Arusha. Now, we have preachers' meetings here. I am involved in a monthly preachers' meeting at Lehman Avenue, and we come in and we talk about sermon outlines and books that we've read and that kind of thing. And then maybe at the end we'll make some announcements. Where we're having a gospel meeting, we're doing VBS and that. They meet every month. All the preachers in Arusha come, and the American preachers don't run this meeting. The local preachers run it, and what they talk about is how they can evangelize Arusha. Which church is doing what? And I was really impressed. One of these preachers is asked to be the secretary each month. They keep notes, and they go around and they say, how many studies are you conducted? Well, I'm conducting 8 studies. And then next month, they'll come back and they say, how those 8 studies turn out. This is a way that they hold each other responsible for what they're doing. And then maybe one congregation is having a vacation Bible school. They all take note of that, and they all go and help them. Or if one of them is working with a new church plant, we started a new congregation in an area of town, they all talk about how they could go and help that church grow. So I was tremendously impressed with these local men and the heart for evangelism that Cy has instilled in these young men. Now, this is Sunday services in the Hero Church. We talked about that. There's another view of the church house, if you will, where we had services Sunday morning at the Hero Church. There's another. That's actually part of the video that I wanted to play. But the class that I taught this class. It met for 5 days, 6 hours a day. We started at 8 o'clock, got done at about 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I taught understanding our religious neighbors. We talked about where all the religious groups in the world came from, the history of the church, and then some distinctive doctrines of each different church, so that they'll understand that when they go out into the field. I had 8 students, all of them English speaking, but they all were Swahili speaking as well. Some from Kenya, some from Nairobi, some from Tanzania, and varying ages. Here are all 8 of them. My best student was this guy, the second one from the left in the back. His name is Kennedy. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. Directly in front of him in the light blue sweatshirt kind of thing is Evans. Evans is about 35 years old. He has a wife and 4 children at home, so you can imagine what a sacrifice it is for him to be gone from home for 6 months out of each year. Other students were from, like I say, Nairobi, Kenya. Another of the churches in Arusha, Kanisha La Cristo. This church at one time was about almost 300 members, but when Cy went there, they made a decision to break this church up into smaller congregations, and they're in the process of trying to establish congregations all over Arusha so that no one will have to walk further than 5 kilometers to get to a church building. 5 kilometers, that's a little less than 5 miles. But they're willing to do it. Now they have a great difficulty transporting people. Very few people have cars. Only Europeans and Americans have cars. And so if they can do that, and they're well along on doing that, establishing these congregations, then everybody will have a place to walk to. Now, they're very much aware of the disadvantages of having a multitude of small congregations as opposed to one large one, but they're also very much aware of the advantages to that as well. Had the opportunity to teach class, but again, had to teach through an interpreter. Now, the reason I was impressed with this and the way they're doing it there in Arusha is because of what Paul told Timothy. The things you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. That's what they're trying to do. Rather than Cy and Stephanie go over there like I said, stay 20 years and baptize 10 people a year. Why not go over there and train 150 preachers and send them out and train some to train them so that when they leave, that school will remain and will continue to train local preachers who can go out and preach. Because I guarantee you, one of the things that you notice when you got to Arusha is there ain't many white folks there. And I was the one who was different. I was the one who was a stranger. I was the one where some people looked at me with a little bit of suspicion. And if I go and knock on somebody's door and try to teach them, they may be receptive, but how much more receptive would they be and open would they be with a fellow Tanzanian? So that's what they're trying to do. I was very impressed with that work. I arrived in Arusha about 1:40 in the morning on Wednesday. I stayed to not the following Saturday, but the next Saturday, which would have been what, 7, 8, 9, 10. I was in Arusha in Tanzania 10 days, counting the 2 days that I did a safari. Then I got on the airport, I got on an airplane. Well, we went to get on an airplane at Mount Kilimanjaro. There are these two pictures here. Mount Meru is just outside of Arusha, and Mount Kilimanjaro. These two mountains are unusual. Mount Meru is the third largest freestanding mountain. No, it's not in a mountain range, it's just there. And it's huge. It's an ancient volcano. And Mount Kilimanjaro, Daniel Gaines was excited. He was like a little kid in a candy store as we were driving to the airport because you could see Mount Kilimanjaro. Usually it's covered with clouds. And by the way, I took probably about 1,500 pictures, so you guys have only seen just a few of them. I probably took 50 pictures of Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was a rather amazing sight. It is the world's largest freestanding mountain. And it just kind of grows up out of the plains, not like the Smoky Mountains where it's in a whole range of mountains. It's just there, and you can drive all the way around it. It's kind of strange, but it too is a dormant volcano. I flew from Kilimanjaro to Dar es Salaam on the east coast, and from there to Johannesburg. From Johannesburg to Cape Town, and I went to Cape Town because a fellow in the name of Paul Gerber, who's been a missionary there for many years. Lehman Avenue has supported it for many years. Creve Hall Church in Nashville, which supports the National School of Preaching, is his sponsoring congregation. About 4 years ago, Paul came to the National School of Preaching and told us all that he was starting a school like that. He came to see what we did, how we ran the school, what we taught, how we taught. And he said, I want to start a school like this in South Africa. And then he started encouraging all of us to come over there and teach for him. So I decided that if I was going to go to Tanzania and teach a short course in the Andrew Connolly School of Preaching, if I'm going to Africa, I may as well go down to South Africa and make one trip out of it. So I was gone about 22 days. But the strange thing about it was when I scheduled this to go to South Africa, I did not know that Paul Gerber was going to be in the States visiting all his supporting congregations. So I went to South Africa and I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody in that place. And but I was told that a fellow by the name of Yankel, that's how you pronounce that, Yankel Friedman, one of the elders, would meet me at the airport, and he would kind of be my guide for the rest of the week. And that's his good wife Stephanie there. And so, not knowing each other, I wondered how would we get together. Well, like I say, Paul and Hetty Gerber were here in the States. I sent Yankel this picture, and I said, just look for a guy with that hat on. And that's how we hooked up in the airport. But it was a great week that I spent, a little more than a week that I spent in South Africa. Now, the difference between Tanzania and South Africa was like daylight and dark. South Africa is the most modern, most advanced country on the continent of Africa. It was settled by the Dutch people, way back during the time of European exploration. It was dominated by white folks. We've all heard about the apartheid that existed in South Africa for many years, and there's still vestiges of that. But South Africa is a very, very European, very modern place. Where I did my work was a place called Somerset West, about 30 miles east of Cape Town proper. There's the church house at Somerset West from the outside in the upper picture, from the inside in the lower picture. Those of you that are close enough, you can see that the group of people there is mixed. Now, what I'm going to say is not racist in any stretch of the imagination. These are categories that are South African. They might be offensive to some folks here, but in South Africa you have three kinds of people. You got white folks, you got black folks, and you got colored folks. White folks are white folks, Europeans mostly, or native South Africans descended from Europeans. Then you got black folks, and those folks are dark-skinned Negroes. We really would have very few people in our Middle Tennessee area, if they went to South Africa, that would be categorized as black. Nearly all of them would be categorized as colored. Now, colored folks in South Africa are mixed race. They may be mixed white and black, they may be mixed Indian and black, or what have you, but they're categorized as mixed race or color. Those are also, by the way, still legal categories. If you are black in South Africa and you want to marry a white person in South Africa, you've got to get special permission from the government. It's done a lot. That's where the colored folks come from. But you have to get permission. These are still legal categories. And but the black folks are not denied any rights, not like they used to be during apartheid. But the point of all of that is that South Africa, like the United States, continues to have a race problem. I took a picture of this up on the wall, and it was interesting. This is in the church house. This one was to the left of the pulpit. To the right of the pulpit is the same picture, except the hands are reversed. The black hand is on the outside, and the white hand is on the back. United in Christ, this congregation has done a tremendous job in overcoming the hostility and the enmity that exists between the races. To the point that in the eldership, you have a colored man, fellow there on the left, named Ashley Halls, and a white man, Yonkel Friedman. They work well together. They made some tremendous plans for the church there, and the future of the church is bright, and the future of the church is good. These two men were godly men, and I really appreciated getting to know him. Like I said, Yonkel was my tour guide and my companion for those 10 days or 9 days I was in South Africa. We went and did a lot of sightseeing during the day. Here we are at a place called Sir Lowry's Pass. This part of South Africa is surrounded by mountains. You come up out of the ocean and you hit this plain, and then around this plain are these beautiful mountains. And we were in the pass going east from Somerset. And behind, over his right shoulder is what's called the False Bay, and the town of Strand there. This bay, the beach around this bay is probably about 12 miles long. Nothing but the most beautiful white sand beach for 12 miles. People come from all over the world to dip their tootsies in the False Bay on those beautiful beaches.
Where's your hat at, Mike?
My hat would have been blown off if I had it on there. The wind was blowing 100 miles an hour up through there. It would have been blown off. Here's another picture of False Bay and the towns of Strand and Somerset West. You can kind of see that thing there. I went to South Africa to teach a class in their little school they got started. I had 5 students generally, taught 1st and 2nd Timothy, as opposed to meeting during the day. These folks meet like we do at Nashville School of Preaching. They go work all day, and then they come to class for 2 hours on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. And so I taught a class for 6 hours, 2 on Monday, 2 on Thursday, and 2 on Tuesday, and 2 on Thursday. And that's not all I did, by the way. Now, all of these folks could speak either Swahili or Afrikaans and English. Of course, I taught in English. Afrikaans is a dialect of Dutch left over from the days of the European. And Stephanie and Yonkel were reared with the Afrikaans. It was kind of weird because we'd be driving somewhere and Stephanie would be in the back seat and I'd be in the front with Yonkel. And we'd be conversing, and all of a sudden he'd stop talking English and start talking Afrikaans to Stephanie. I'm sitting over there, well, okay, whatever. He told me later, he apologized. He said, we don't mean anything by that. It's just that, anytime we get to talking to each other, we talk to each other in Afrikaans. He never talked to me in Afrikaans, but it's a really interesting sounding language. On Friday, after everything was done, we took a day off, and I spent the day with Ashley. We were on the way to the Cape of Good Hope. Maybe you've heard of the Cape of Good Hope. That was where all the ships crashed and sank when the Europeans were trying to sail around the tip of Africa, going to the Far East to get the spices and what have you. But I had the opportunity to spend a good bit of time with Ashley. Ashley has a job in the national government, a very prestigious job. He's a well-educated, highly intelligent individual, and has brought some training and some expertise to the church that has really benefited the church with respect to planning for the future. One of the fellows I met there was this fellow named Ben Little. Ben is going to come to Somerset West and fill the pulpit, which will free up Paul Gerber to move over and work with the schools full time. Paul and the rest, Paul and Ashley and Yonkel, have finally realized that they needed to do the same thing that the folks at Arusha were doing, and that is train local men to preach the gospel. Not to expect the American church to send a missionary over there, but they're working real hard. Now, Ben is a native South African, and when they speak English, by the way, they speak with a delightful English lilt to their voice. And great young man, highly intelligent, smart. I heard him preach a couple of times, did a great job. That's their daughter in the front, and their little adopted son, just precious family. I know the future's going to be bright with them. Wednesday night, they don't have services at the church building because, again, especially with the poor class of folks, they just don't have any way to get there. And the buses quit running, and so they have Wednesday meetings in members' homes. This is in one of the black neighborhoods, and I had to teach 2 classes, and it required a little bit of hustling, but you'll notice that we just met around the room there, and we sang, and we prayed, and we had Bible study, and everything was fine, was delightful. And but that same night, we had a meeting in a fellow's house by the name of Niels. Niels is a white African, South African, and we had refreshments, and it was just a completely different environment. But these were the white folks with the advantages left over from the days of apartheid, nice house, the ability to entertain, where these black folks just didn't have that ability. But we had a good Bible study in both houses, and it was great. By the way, the guy in the far left there that you can see, his name's Javon. They're grooming Javon to be another elder because Ashley and Yonkel both realize they're getting older. And so they need to be looking for new leadership in the congregation. And Javon is one of those that they're looking to step into the eldership. Then on Sunday, the last Sunday I was there, of course I preached both services, taught Bible class. They had a graduation for 2 of the students, Mozzie and Joseph. Now Mozzie and Joseph both are a little older than some of the students at Andrew Connolly School of Preaching, but they graduated. They'll go out and they'll conduct services at little churches all over Tanzania. And I think Joseph, is not from South Africa, but was from one of the other nations round about, and he will go back to his home and preach and teach. So the next Saturday, went down to the Cape of Good Hope. There's a picture of the Cape of Good Hope. There's me standing in an overlook, and the Indian Ocean is over my right shoulder, the Atlantic Ocean is over my left, and I'm sure you can tell the difference. Which part is the Atlantic Ocean, which part is the Indian Ocean. But I got a map while I was there, and it showed this places where there were shipwrecks, and there were just dozens of them all around this particular place. The wind was blowing, and I can imagine how difficult it was for a sailing ship to round the Cape of Good Hope. We also did the Table Mountain, which is their #1 tourist attraction in South Africa. Rode up a cable car to the top of that mountain, walked all over the top of it. And one of the great views is a view out over Cape Town to Robben Island from Table Mountain. See the island out there in the middle of the bay? Anybody know why Robben Island is famous? That's where Nelson Mandela was in prison for some 20 years. And when apartheid ended, he was released and elected to presidency of the South African nation. And they have tours out to that island. Now, I wanted to go, but they were having a strike among the pilots of the boats that took them out there, so they didn't get to go. Well, what about the trip? What was it worth it? Well, counting the 50-something hours that I traveled, while I was there, I spoke in classes, worship, and devos a total of 52 times in 18 days. So I did a lot of teaching while I was there. I got a first-hand look at 2 of the works that we are supporting and was tremendously impressed by them. But I'm impressed by the fact, and the whole point of this, Richard and I talked about this, the whole point of this, why do we do things like this? Why do we believe in the Great Commission? Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. Or all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We sing the song from time to time, the gospel is for all. Y'all ever sing that song, the gospel is for all? Well, it is for all. And to be quite frank about it, we're sitting over here in America with all kinds of resources that those folks don't have, never will have in the foreseeable future. One of the resources we have is the gospel. And we have the ability, we have the resources to take it to other people. And some people have taken that commission seriously. The Staffords, and Daniel Gaines and his wife and family. And they are sharing that dream and that intention with local people there so that those people can carry the gospel to their own folks and preach and teach. And we believe in that. At least I think most of us here in this room do. And I know that Bearwallow is sending money to various missionary works. And in Romans chapter 10, it talks about the need to call upon the Lord to be saved. And then Paul raises some questions. Well, how can they call upon him of whom they have not believed? And how can they believe on him whom they have not heard? And how can they hear except someone be sent? Maybe it's not our place to go, but maybe it's our place to send. And at least we can do that. We can send. And so anytime you have the opportunity to slip a $50 bill to a missionary, do it. Because they need it. And anytime you have the opportunity to encourage them. Did you see the faces of those kids with those supplies? Abby, bless her sweetheart, she's just going to soon be a teenager. And she gave me the biggest hug. And she told me, said, it means so much to know that the people at Lehman care about us and remember us to send. We send some vanilla wafers and goldfish over there. Now, how much did that cost us? About $100 worth of stuff in that bag, and of course me lugging it around the airport. But what did it cost us? But it meant so much to them to know that somebody is standing behind it and supporting it. So we believe in that. We believe in mission work. We believe in doing what God tells us to do. And like I say, I know that Bearwallow has supported it. They've helped me go on mission trips before. We need to do all of that we possibly can because the gospel is for all.